So we're going to get started. I'm Laura Flessner. I'm your host today. We're going to be talking about, the title here is A Collaboration Story in Building Powerful Insights Across Panasonic. And this was a really, really fun project that we wanted to be able to just share with all of you. And what's really great about this is it was something that was started by Shane here from Panasonic. And it was an idea that she had that started small as a one person having an idea, but it grew into having over 400 participants in her organization across multiple countries being part of this. So we're going to dive into that story quite a bit today and also share with you the challenges that we came across and how we overcame those, because I think those are the really interesting bits that we all can learn from each other. But before we get started, I wanted to do a quick introduction so you know who's chatting here, and then also just some logistics here. We're going to be chatting for about 30 minutes and then have about 15 minutes for Q&A, so about 45 minutes to give you guys some buffer time between for your next meeting, because I know that back-to-back is a hard thing to do. And so if you have any questions as you have them, go ahead and throw those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. And with that, doing some introductions. All right, so we have Shane Hanson here from Panasonic. Say hi, Shane.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shane from Panasonic.
And then we've got Sally Kempers here from Untapped Innovation.
Hello.
And Simon Dunn from OptimaRetail.
Hi guys, how you doing?
And I'm your host, Laura Flessner from MindTap. And so, some quick little questions just so we get to know our panelists here outside of work too. First question for fun is, what was your first job, as in the first time you actually just earned money? So, Sally, why don't you go first?
Oh, that's really hard to pinpoint. I think I've got to go for mushroom picking. Because I'll never forget it. It was great. In fact, it was very close to where I live now, near Woking, and they were all grown in manure. So it was this terrible smell. We're out of the rain, but hours and hours of slicing off mushrooms.
That's amazing. Thank you. How about you, Simon?
I started in retail. I started in the supermarket, so I was one of the guys who turned up in the evening and restocked all the shelves and cleaned up when stores used to shut in the evening, cleaned up the store before it shut. So I started in retail and I'm pretty much still in retail.
We see where your expertise came from, right? Hands-on.
Yeah.
And how about you, Shane?
My first job was actually a very interesting one. It was teaching conversational English to software engineers in India. So this is the late 80s. I was, I think, 14 or 15, and there was the first outsourcing projects coming to India, and there were a lot of software engineers, but they didn't know how to converse with Americans. They didn't know how to do small talk. And so for 100 rupees a month, which is about £1, I used to teach them, hi, hello, how's the weather, da-da-da. So conversational English, teaching conversational English to software engineers was my first job.
Wow, bridging gaps already, right from the bat. Oh, that's amazing. And my first job was teaching swim lessons. I was on the swim team, and actually when I was living in the Netherlands, I was helping teach some swim lessons to other students at my school. So that was it. Okay, and then last fun question is your favorite quote or motto. So Simon, how about you?
I would pick "Seize the Day" from an old film called Dead Poets Society. It obviously goes back thousands of years, but I just, life's too short, I think. So do what you can in every day and make sure you enjoy every day.
Amazing. So important. And how about you, Shane?
I think mine is very simple, to be honest. It's about learning to trust the journey, even if you don't understand it. So sometimes let the journey take you.
That's such a wise one. And how about you, Sally?
I always try and seek to understand. I think it helps to figure people out, whether it's work or personal life, and not jump to assumptions, but also dig that bit deeper and find out what's really going on.
Oh, that's amazing. And as I know you, that's core to who you are, Sally. And for me, mine is actually I got it from Amy Van Dyke, and she is an Olympic a U.S. swimmer. And she said, always be happy, but never be satisfied. And so that's what's driven me on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to welcome everybody who's joined us since we began. We're going to get started in here and really diving into the story of what happened at Panasonic here. And as you do, just a reminder, if you have any questions, throw those in the chat as we go. So Shane, I'm going to start with you here. So could you just tell us where did this idea initially come from? What was the beginnings as you were in Panasonic and had this idea about this big culture change? How did it get started?
Well, it started with actually joining Panasonic. So I was hired by a visionary leader, Mr. David Priest, and he hired me to bring specialist insight skills within Panasonic, and typical for the tech sector, right? Technology first, marketing later. So the culture within Panasonic was very much innovation is developed in the Far East, in the headquarters in Japan. And we, those who were based in the European markets, in the marketing organization, just had to get on with the launch, with the product launch. So a lot of my work, and which was my skill set, was identifying compelling and actionable insights. But very early on, I realized that the adaptation or the application of that insight was not as it should be. And when I dug a bit deeper, I found that the biggest hurdle was the lack of understanding of how to apply the insight, or even which insight to apply when. And so my manager at the time, Mr. Takashi Yanai, suggested, why don't I teach in a one-on-one or maybe in a face-to-face session, my core team of marketeers how to apply insight. And I did kick it off in March 2020, but soon after COVID hit and everything took a back step. But the need was still there. And so with COVID, as a consequence of COVID, digital adoption was rapid across most sectors, most industries, right? So I then pivoted and thought about how about making an online training. So this is when I started thinking, what do I need to do? How should I approach this? Do I need to reach out to other people or agencies? So this is how the idea came. But the vision was, I love what I do. I love generating insights. I just wanted to shift the culture a little bit towards adapting and applying that insight in the day-to-day marketing decision making.
Yeah, we know how impactful that can be when those insights are applied in every part of the project. And so you reached out to Sally, from what I understand. And
Yes.
yeah. And so Sally, when Shane reached out to you and you learned about this vision that she had of being able to really share the power of insights within Panasonic, I'm curious about what your thoughts were initially, because you ended up not doing this alone. You ended up reaching out to others, which I think often takes strength and humility to say that, this isn't just me alone to do. So, what were your thoughts when Shane shared this idea with you?
Well, it was a pretty ambitious plan that Shane had, but I guess that point of not going it alone. At Untapped, we work with a huge range of expert associates, so that's just our normal way of operating. It's far more efficient to deliver against such a wide range of business objectives. So that felt like the natural thing to do. But I mean, going back to Shane, she was talking about training. It had gone from how she was describing the one-on-one conversations with people she was starting to talk about really large numbers across geographies, people at totally different skill levels. And she started talking about the types of insight skill that she and the capability that she wanted to cover. And it was starting at the beginning, which made a lot of sense. You know, how and why is this sort of insight driven approach? How's that going to lead to better business return on investment? And then going through what are the different types of insights, how to extract them, and then getting onto some more detailed thinking around customer target, customer journey, all the way to designing products, packaging, claims and messaging. And then she had this vision of going into category insights and getting more detailed at that end. So obviously this is something that, you know, needed more hands, couldn't do alone. And because of the scale and of what she wanted to do, we needed learning and development expertise. So I mean, Laura, this is where we started talking. Your expertise in innovation leadership, your neuroscience of learning. We needed to ensure that big change was going to happen in Panasonic. So an obvious partnership there. And then Simon from OptimaRetail, all of your expertise in category insight to make sure that we could cover the breadth of the vision that Shane had.
That's amazing, Sally. And I remember hearing about this project. I just got so excited for the change and the difference that this could make once it's in Panasonic, with the scale and the impact that Panasonic already has around the world. And so, Simon, as Sally reached out to you and Shane reached out to you to talk about being part of this, I know you're an expert within category and retail insights. You're often doing consulting work and you're often running a lot of the projects yourself with that expertise, but you don't often teach it, right, in training in this sense. So I'm curious of what you thought here. You know, did you have any concerns doing this, and what were the challenges in taking on the teaching role?
I think I mean, I've got quite a long career in sort of retail, and then about 10 or 15 years ago, I moved onto the more manufacturer side. So we do a lot of work looking at category insights, also shopper journeys, and how people shop and how brands should come to market. And also because of the retail experience, talking a lot to retailers and advising what the best way to approach retailers is in terms of telling category stories. So within all of that experience, I've done a lot of coaching on a one-to-one basis, but less in the kind of more structured training. Although Shane and I worked together on a project on training a few years ago as well. So we trained 100 people. So I think, you know, it's not something that we typically do every day, but I think the key is, you know, being open-minded, being able to kind of engage with lots of different agencies, and that, like we had 3 agencies working together on this program, and you know, by working together, we create something much bigger than each individual part would have. And I think what was great with the journey was sort of learning what each other's strengths were and enabling each other to sort of challenge each other to improve the overall program. I think the process, as we kind of went through that process, it worked really well. So as I say, it's good to be open-minded and really think about how we can build something fantastic together, which has gone on, as we've seen over the last sort of 12 months or so. It's, you know, the momentum continues to grow even now.
And that's what I love about this, is the story really isn't over yet, is it? And
we've only just started.
It really only just started. So we're just telling the beginnings of the story here. But to build off of what Sally and Simon were saying, you know, for my experience too, it was so amazing working across this team with these different expertise and the ability to trust each other's expertise And being open-minded to what each person brought enabled us to challenge each other and actually, ask each other questions of like, do you really want to do that? What's the impact and purpose behind it? And in doing that, we actually, challenge each other to a better place. And for instance, as we think about learning, um, our brain can only take in so much at a time. And so I knew this as far as, how the brain works as we learn. So as Sally and Simon would share what they want to teach, I'd challenge, well, what's the key part that you really want people to take away? Because Sally and Simon just know so much and it's so easy for them now that they're just spouting all of this amazing information. And I'm just like, okay, that's really great. But if you want to change behavior, you have to be really, really focused and really specific. And I think that being able to challenge each other to what are the key pieces here was where a lot of the magic came from, because then we boiled it down to the core important part that really helped people in Panasonic be able to move forward. And so now, as we've gotten this project started in our story here, Shane, moving this high impact innovative idea through an organization isn't necessarily a smooth run, right? So what were some of the challenges that you faced pushing this through Panasonic, and how did you overcome them?
When I think back, I think the biggest challenge was when we launched the training. So the training was bite-sized modules, and thanks to your feedback, Laura, we really made each module simple and easy to follow so people would get the key messages. So it was 30 to 35 minutes max. But the biggest challenge in the business was we don't have time to do training. We are too busy. We are marketing. We have campaigns running, or we have products to launch, and we are in meeting after meeting after meeting. And so I think the challenge was tangible, being within the organization. And I had to go back to basics and really talk to some key advocates or managers one-on-one and say, give it a try. And by the way, if you give me some feedback or improvement points, I might adapt or change the training. So they kind of, the first cohort of people who went and did the training went in with a mindset was, we'll find some improvement points. But actually, they loved the training. And in the meantime, we have a new CEO in Europe, Mr. Katayama, and bump into him in the office one day, and he, quick 30-second elevator pitch. I'm running an online training for Insight. Really? What is it all about? Oh, it'll blow your mind. It's bite-sized modules. It's a very simple explanation. Oh, I always wanted to learn a bit more about Insight. So I then have the CEO of Panasonic Europe actually doing the training and writing back to me saying, I can't wait for the next module to launch. And I think that was the turning point. What happened was he started talking about it, and as did the managers, with their peer groups. And it was very simple, basic word of mouth marketing that actually got over the initial challenge. And what Katayama did was really, really simple. He told me, can you track people on their progress? And that was it. After I sent the first tracking report, he just followed up with his direct reports and said, team, this is brilliant. It's really insightful. It's a new way of working or approaching the challenges we have within the European markets. Let's learn from it. And the rest is history, right? So we have now 400 active participants in over 20 countries, and with around 2,000 modules, studied amongst themselves. So yeah, the challenge was tangible. It was big. It's probably relevant to any organization, but I think the solution was very basic. Comes down to talking one-on-one with people and getting those early advocates in.
They talk about the power of that elevator pitch. You just demonstrated what can happen based off of one elevator pitch. But I think the power of networking and having those conversations you show just really can make that big shift into that movement. And when you have momentum, then it's hard to stop. Uh, and then also some key measurements, right? The key measures, you measure, you get what you measure, is what they say. And so, as you're rolling out this training, Sally, question for you, because uh, this training went across multiple geographies from Japan to the UK to other parts of Asia, etc. What strategies did Untapped use to help this program be successful?
So I want to build off what you were saying earlier, Laura, about behaviour change. And as you say, the challenge is you've got different functions, you've got different geographies. We've already talked about everybody's at different experience levels. And so what we needed to do is think of ways to get that behaviour change. We talk about making training stick. How are people going to be able to remember what they learn and importantly reapply it when they need to reapply it? So given the fact that we had lots of different modules building up in expertise, we needed to plan this over time, so that they were spaced out at the right time, give people enough time. And the beauty of doing it in this online way is that people can engage when it suits them over a period of time. But then to help that sort of continuity afterwards, we set up this moderated discussion forum after each module. So some specific exercises, and we have really good engagement actually, which goes back to your point, Shane, about getting management endorsement for the program. So that continued discussion afterwards just helps that learning stick. And then the other point I want to mention is ensuring that the content is really engaging. So we all worked on this together, and Laura, you were instrumental there in helping to take these single focus messages and think about how to make the content really interesting. So we had plenty of visuals. We came up with little characters and animations for those, for our little character we had, and the story and his journey through his sort of user journey and all the different experiences he was having. So using storytelling as a memorable tool, and then case studies. And Simon, I mean, I think as you measured how well the program was doing, case studies were highlighted as one of the success points. And we know that if you bring a case study to life, you're showing and not telling, and that really helps people. And also little quizzes. Laura, you were brilliant at putting in little quizzes along the way through the courses. You get that adrenaline burst, and it just helps keep people engaged. So yeah, a couple of points there that I think were critical to make it work, to make sure that people could really get this behaviour change, because the training was memorable, and they could use it when they needed it then on their jobs and reapply it.
A couple of interesting things I remember as we were looking at, what stories to put in, what case studies, as we were talking across as a team here. And it was so cool having different case studies come in, especially in the beginning when we were going over overviews. So you can see it coming from the beginning of understanding the consumer insights from Untapped, and then how does it translate then to the retail part with Simon, different case studies you brought in, and then Shane, case studies of what's happening within Panasonic, that you're already using these tools and these approaches so that it's already part of the culture, right? So it's really important to see where those studies come from and how they come together and tell that story. And then the last part, just to add on to the little quizzes, right? So an interesting fact is when you ask a question, you just hear a question, your brain automatically tries to answer it, like automatically. And there's like nothing you can do to stop it. So it triggers someone to start thinking. So I thought that was really interesting. So, just a reminder for everyone listening, we're going to be going to Q&A here soon in a little bit. So if you have any questions for any of us, start putting that in the chat so we can see and take your questions. But Simon, I had a question for you. As you were as you were looking at, teaching this really intricate um, methodology of how you go about identifying insights within retail and customer, what did you find really helped to sorry. What did you find that really helped to get across the teachings there and bring your expertise wisdom?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I do a lot of work, whether it be looking at sort of shopper research, where you get like a massive pile of data, you ask lots of questions, and you can mine it for months and months. And I also do a lot of work on category. So we get sales data from whether it be GfK or Nielsen or IRI or dunnhumby, whether it be retail sales data. And again, you've got a massive data, a lot of numbers. And having done it for years and years, it becomes, as a practitioner, it becomes automatic. You just don't think, you just kind of get a feel, you know what to look for, and it becomes very efficient if you do it for a long time. But what one of Shane's challenges to me was, well, we've got people in the business who they're managing different products, they're managing different categories, and they get this data, but they don't really know what to do with it. And they get like chart packs. So different data agencies would sort of render the data into different charts. And the challenge Shane said was, well, how do I get some meaningful insight from that data in half an hour? Which is like, that's some challenge, because it's like, we could be talking weeks of work to get the insight. But I think what really helped was trying to put a structure around it. So we did one module specifically to take on that challenge. And I came back to two key questions. So, to give people a kind of route through the data is what is driving the category. So what's driving category growth or driving a category trend, or what is driving growth in my brand, or if it's more challenging, what is giving us concerns as a brand. So you start with a couple of key questions, and then there's another simple technique which is called the 5 whys. So you just keep asking the question. So we did a case study in one of the modules where we needed to understand the category. So we said, well, what's driving the category? And I can't remember the precise example, but I think it was the average price was going up maybe in the category. So that was driving category growth. So you then move on to another question, which is, well, why is the average price growing up? So you go back and every time you go down that funnel, you kind of filter what you're looking at. So you're not trying to boil the ocean, if you like, but you ultimately end up root causing the issue. And it can be quite a simple way. Firstly, it's a simple process that somebody who isn't a data person can kind of understand quite quickly, but it also gives them a really nice route to come through and get some meaning and get some insights quite quickly from a process. So I think that really helped. And that it was quite a tough module to put together, but every module that we did, we got feedback on, and we got really good feedback on that module as well. So I guess it must have worked.
And that's really great, because then you put together a framework of really how to think critically that can be applied in any situation then, which can be really powerful. And that's really a key aspect around digging into data, is really just being curious, right?
Exactly.
And so, one other challenge that I wanted to share as we were putting this together, which actually happens not just like with this particular project, but almost with every project that I'm on, is the fact that so many people want to be involved and review things right before it goes out. And we had this where, we had the modules created in English, and then we were translating those to Japanese. And we wanted to make sure that the training that we were creating, it was custom made so that it fit the Japanese culture, that it made sense when it was translated correctly, and that it fit the Panasonic culture as well. We're using the correct terminology that people usually use within the organization and things like that. And so we originally had this team of reviewers for every new module that came out, but the challenge with that would be just the timing of the different reviews, because it is, when the reviewers could fit it into their schedule to review. And then once one reviewed, it's like, well, there was two different ways to say this in Japanese, and one person said this and another said that. And it just really held up the process of being able to execute. So what we ended up doing, the solution was having a senior enough stakeholder that did the reviews. So we knew that it fit the culture. We knew it fit how the leadership thought about this program, and we knew it fit the language. And so by simplifying really what was needed and who really needed to do that, really helped to streamline the process so that we were able to execute on time for all of the modules thereafter. So just wanted to share that little story there. And we have a couple of questions in the chat, but I just wanted to have one last one here for Shane, because as you had a choice of who to work with here, right? And oftentimes, there's this question of who do you work with, and you could have worked with some bigger companies here as well. So just kind of curious about your choice here of smaller businesses and a collaboration across multiple here to be able to execute this really amazing vision you had.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Laura. So I think, yeah, I work with a lot of big agencies, and they are brilliant. They have their place in how we operate in Panasonic. They have scale, they have diverse expertise, and very good resources in terms of manpower to deliver bigger strategic research and insight projects. So no doubt about that. But I think it comes back to the vision for the training. My number one criteria was I needed partners or agencies that will help me make something that is really bespoke for Panasonic. Secondly, the levels within the marketing organization was very different. There were people who were just new hires, fresh out of university, and there were marketeers who were 10, 15 years in the role. So how do we create something that goes across different levels? So advanced modules, basic modules. So I needed people with expertise, but who were also able to adapt the content as required and amplify the specific topics that we were battling on a day-to-day basis within the business. So I was very clear what the topics were. I just didn't know how to bring it to life. And so in a nutshell, my partners or my agency partners would have to be agile. They would have to be willing to test and learn. I was not sure we would nail it with the first module or in the first go. So I needed people who had that innovative mindset, and I think, and who were willing to be flexible with how we do things. So I think looking at all of these, I had the early on, I would say, insight that smaller agency or agencies might be a good fit, because bigger companies probably might have a fixed product or a fixed solution and maybe adapt, but only to a certain extent. And hence I went ahead with smaller agencies.
Amazing. Thank you much for sharing that, Shane. And so we have a couple of questions in the chat here. One from Carolyn. I think this is for you, Shane. Did the business ask for growth metrics or tangible demonstrated benefits from the program? And how have they observed it?
It was not directly asked for as in a Western organization. So being very, Japanese culture driven, the metrics or the credibility of the training was judged by the type of Panasonic case studies included. So I had deliberately put in case studies. I had worked with Sally and with Simon in the past, where we had success stories from the UK or from Europe that everyone globally recognized as this is a very good case study. So I utilized those in the beginning, but as we progressed into the training, I started collecting case studies. As Sally mentioned, we had an online portal which was managed by the team. So we were able to collect case studies from across the globe. And this is what we are actually rolling out as a second year this year, as just case studies, because we ended up with close to 300 different case studies shared by people from across 20 countries. So we have a treasure trove of case studies now. And so we are picking up these, and I think our focus is trying to bring in more Panasonic case studies that we share on the online platform. But the measure is not a very clear-cut one. I think that is one. The second one is, I think the measurement from a management perspective is more around is the team enabled enough to actually apply the learning from the training, or have you confused them? So, and if they are confused, can you set up a follow-up meeting, because that will, empower them to really apply it. So I think it's not a metric for the sake of a metric, but management have really taken up the whole concept or the idea of insight-driven decision-making within marketing, and want teams to change the way they operate. I hope that answers your question.
It's interesting because on top of that, Shane, you have actually been measuring the numbers completing and asking their feedback. So you've got all of those usual metrics, haven't you? And lots and lots of voluntary comments around what it's enabling people to do. So you've kind of done it always in terms of evaluating the success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what's really good is you can see the engagement. So one of the measures is the engagement and the pull from the teams who are conducting the training, because it was, it's grown beyond the original groups of people who were targeted for the training, and they're going a long way into the program and they keep coming back. And that, that's got to be one of the best measures you could apply, is people see the value in it themselves and are hungry for more.
Absolutely. And the engagement and the training itself, with the discussion forums that Sally had mentioned, and how many people are adding on to the discussion and building into how they see this working and asking the questions that they have, has been a really great indication. All right, so Paul has a question. I know, Shane, you touched on this a little bit about bringing the stakeholders on board, but what else, if anything, did you do? And really about how did you ensure that commitment from the stakeholders for the time needed to do this?
Yeah, I think this was the second year of COVID, so 21, when we launched this in April. And the stakeholder management actually started 6 months earlier than before the launch. So we already started towards the end of 2020. I started engaging key stakeholders because I needed budget. I needed time myself to dedicate towards this. And I think the biggest hook for the stakeholders was, we are going through a very uncertain time. And if we continue to do what we've always done in the past, we may not get the results we want. And so people were automatically open to trying out new things, but that didn't mean they said yes from the first day. I think they wanted to see a plan, and they wanted to see some real, I would say, tangible results. And I think the project I mentioned, working with Sally and Simon, already in the UK, we had some very good business results to back what we were talking about. So I think it was a combination of using business results, a combination of the uncertainty that COVID was bringing to the industry and to the retail landscape, and the idea that we need to empower our marketeers to actually not only just survive COVID, but come out stronger on the other side. And I think all that kind of came together in terms of engaging stakeholders. How did I ensure the time commitment? That was really difficult, actually. And it's still a challenge. It's still a challenge. There are lots of people who want to learn and say, I don't have time. But I think this is where I could see a clear difference between those who really were interested in learning and learning more would find the time. And maybe it was their own time, but they found the time. So I think the time is still a challenge.
That's great, Shane. Thanks for being honest with that as well, because we know that that is a challenge across the corporate universe. We have one last question from John. Before I dive into that, I want to ask, Sally, Simon, Shane, if you want to put any of your contact information in the chat, I'm going to do the same for anybody that wants to reach out individually. Okay. So we'll have that in the chat for all of you. But John is asking a question for Simon a little bit here. The next generation of tools, and having done some work with Tesco and many others in programming and store sizes, they're looking to the metaverse for planogramming and things like that. So curious there on next trends that you're seeing as suppliers to be aware of.
Oh, that's a big question. I worked for Tesco, so I remember 15, 20 years ago, my commercial director was being pitched with some virtual reality tech to do the planograms. So there's a lot you can do, and I guess there's a couple of angles to it. One is probably about efficiency, which is where the automated planograms will come in. I mean, I think having been in retail, it's a bit of a nightmare because you can have the best system in the world, but it relies on the store mapping being correct, and every store is individual. But the system doesn't know where the pillar is down the aisle, so it can be a little bit difficult to fully automate. I would probably answer the question more framed in terms of insight, though. So I think if you go back sort of 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, the ranging for stores would be pretty basic, and there'd be a lot of buyers out there who would be literally just getting their sales data and ranking the products, and then the best selling product went in the best store. And then loyalty cards came along and gave a lot richer insight and gave a lot of insight around substitutability. I think what probably it remains an opportunity is understanding sort of causality and motivation more in terms of what shoppers do and how they shop. And I think some retailers do a fair job in terms of understanding that. But in the UK certainly you've got a situation that I guess it'd probably be quite similar in other markets. A lot of the retailers are continuing to try and rationalize range. They're trying to, this has been a process that's happened for sort of 5, 10, 15 years, where they're reducing SKU count. They're trying to become more operationally efficient. What that means is they continually go through and they try and optimize, and they try and say, well, this product is substituted for that product, so we only need one of them. But if you walk around a store, I mean, like I do a lot of work with data, and whenever I go to a store, I always learn something. And you look around and you see, well, they've got all these sophisticated tools, but it's still not the best range. There's still a lot of duplication because the numbers, the data, like it's difficult for the data to give you a different result than saying, well, here's, the data thinks it's optimized. But what I'm trying to say is you need to talk to shoppers. You need to understand what they want, what is truly going to add incremental value to a product. So I think in a roundabout way, probably to answer your question, I think it's trying to combine different data sources and get some meaningful and repeatable outputs from it. And I'd say, to be fair, Tesco, from my experience, are probably one of the best, if not the best, in the UK at doing that. Other retailers are some way behind, but you need to get into the mind of a shopper to understand what they want and what they might want, rather than how they react to what you've already put there. So
the basics. The basics are always going to be the most powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. As we wrap up here, our time is coming up. It's went so fast as we're really having so much fun here with this amazing story here. Real quick, I want to ask everyone to share one piece of quick advice. So Shane, quick advice for maybe somebody who has a big idea.
Start with a noble intention. Your intention will take you through all the challenges and hurdles, and it will help you bring people on board. So always start, your starting point has to be a noble and the right thing for the business.
That's amazing. And MindTap is all about supporting individuals who have innovative ideas. And a piece of advice that I have is don't let title, don't let your own expertise stop you from leading a really cool idea that you have that you know is going to make a big impact, that has that noble purpose that Shane's talking about. Don't let that stop you. You can still make a big difference right from where you are. And Sally and Simon, how about you as business owners? What advice do you have for other business owners?
Builds off very much what you and Shane have both said. As with developing any new product, you've got to start by fully understanding what are the goals, what are all the needs of your target audience, what are the pain points as well. And you're only really going to succeed if you start with what's needed. You then need to figure out who the expert skills you need to put in place and who you've got to collaborate with to pull that off.
And I think I'd probably build again. I mean, my advice would probably be focused. Be clear in terms of what your objective is. Be really sort of ruthlessly focused on delivering those objectives and doing some things really, really well, rather than doing lots of things slightly less well. And also take a bit of time to reevaluate. Do some sprints, complete a process, take a step back and say, is it still right to focus on this thing? It's good. It's fine if you want to change your focus, but be focused.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who have joined us live here or are watching as a recording. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have further questions. And with that, have a great day, everybody. Take care.